let's just jump into it. So I'm going to share my screen. All right, so a little bit about this project. A couple of friends and I decided that we wanted to work on this problem that we all have of not being very happy with a lot of calendar apps. We all have a lot of needs for managing our day-to-day, and we have different ways that we're trying to solve it, and we've all done a lot of back and forth on trying different apps, not really liking them. And so we have this idea of designing a calendar application that acts a little bit like a calendar and a little bit like a day planner. But the really big difference of it is this idea of it being customizable. And it's not just us that are building that functionality, but also a community of plugin developers who are also creating functionality for this as well. And so the idea is, how do we design a calendar/day planner where it's able to be customizable, which is a unique problem. If you've ever designed an interface where you've had user input or a community input, it could be pretty tricky. So there's a lot of guidelines, there's a lot of use cases, a lot of edge cases that we got to think through here on this. So what we're going to do today is explore this idea of how to add widgets to an interface. So without further ado, that's what I'm going to work on right now. So if you have questions about what I'm working on and how I'm doing this, feel free to ask. I'd love to explain what I'm working on and talk about it a little bit. All right, so this is the interface that we have so far. And this little, we got some rough things going on around here. This is kind of the basic idea. Oh, that's broken. So we have over in the left-hand rail, we have different views that you can customize. So if you wanted to do like a personal calendar, you wanted to do a work calendar, you wanted to keep them separate. You wanted to create other ones that are customizable, where you could do, your morning pages. If you've ever done morning pages, I did morning pages for years. I really enjoyed that. That practice every morning was to write and to focus on what I'm supposed to do for that day. And it's very similar to like bullet journal as well. Bullet journal is kind of a version of morning pages as well. And so this is being able to create an interface that is catered to you, that you're able to build out your dream life manager, really. So got a few different concepts here. It's pretty rough. Yeah, I'm going to explore this a little bit. So what I'm really exploring is, we'll go over here. So this is to set this up. This is the challenge that we're doing. This interface is built through these different these little app, or we're calling them widgets. So these will be assembled through these various widgets. So right here we see like a mini calendar, that would be a widget. We see this list of events as well. I just repeated those two, and then we have this big one, which is this calendar view that we're all very familiar with, that you're able to switch it to day view, week, month, quarter, year. So the challenge is, how do we lay this out? Excuse me. How do we lay this out in a way that it's easy to use, where people can customize these things? So that's what we're going to set up today, because we've got a couple of things that we're kind of exploring right now. One is this idea of, do we create templates where there are different page layouts where you're able to make tweaks to something that's already existing? So something like a calendar layout versus a day planner layout. You can see these examples of templates up here. So if you wanted to go create a new page, you'd have that name, and then you're able to pick what kind of page template that you can have. So also this idea of panels. So if you've ever used like a coding interface, like VS Code or Atom or something like that, you have this concept of panels, which are grouped pages. So like grouped files that you have open. So what we're exploring a little bit is, do we use panels, or do we have freeform widgets that you can drag around and kind of stick to more of a grid system? So that's what we're going to work on. All right, so working through this flow. So this is what I would imagine, or this is kind of a first rough draft. This was done in FigJam. And so we're kind of messing around with this idea first to see if this works. Oh, I realize I am not sharing. You can't see my mouse. I'm going to fix that for you. All right. There we go. Now we got a cursor. All right. So working through this flow of building a page. So from this this pages ribbon, we click the plus button, and then we go into this kind of create mode. So we got blank, we got a calendar view, we got a day planner, we got things like Gantt chart. So let's work through this and say, like, I've typed in something and I click blank. So what do we have here? So one of the ideas I was playing around with is this idea of add widgets, and it's just kind of a mosaic layout where you have all the different widgets. That was one idea that I was kind of working through. So you can see that this is kind of what it would look like. But the challenge is that we're going to have such a big problem with developers trying to figure out the best way to do widget layout. What I mean by that is, this is a pretty small widget, this mini calendar. This would kind of be what I consider a sidebar widget, where this one, you can see that it's clearly not smushing down properly, but this is really big. This is like, takes up most of the screen. So the challenge with this is, if we make developers make widgets of any size, then we're going to be asking a lot from them, because trying to make this responsive, each of those widgets, would be pretty tricky. I think that's asking a little too much of community developers to do something like that. And so I think we have to follow a grid, probably. So let's think about that. So imagine something like this. Okay. So we'll lock that. We'll just draw some rectangles over it. So this is what I'm talking about as far as like panels, because this could essentially be a 3-panel interface. So we'll do red, we'll drop this opacity. right? So this is essentially a 3-panel interface. So all of these could be scalable, could be responsive, but the challenge is that we'd have to do limits on these. This can only shrink down to a certain size. Any smaller than that, it kind of becomes useless. So if I was to do that, if I was to build an interface, I lock that. So we could think about these as draggable panels. Because that's essentially what I do. When I delete that sidebar here, so you could see when I turn this off, this would just stretch out. So maybe the best way to solve this is to do large widgets and small widgets, where certain things like these sidebar widgets would be considered small, and this calendar view would be considered large. Because there's other types of widgets that could also be large, something like a Gantt chart, something like a full year view as well, kind of like the dot grid calendar, if you've ever seen one of those. That could be a way to do that. So let's test out that assumption. Let's see if we can do things assigned to a grid. And then if that doesn't work, let's also explore what that would look like doing it as panels as well. Okay. So that's the goal. So we're going to delete these. Okay. All right. So if I'm going through this flow, I click add and I choose blank, or I name it personal calendar and I choose blank. And here's what I'm left with. So we'll just do like placeholder blank state. Okay. Not a great placeholder copy, but it's all right. All right, so they add a widget, and then here's the available widgets. So this is approaching it kind of like the iOS, like widget grid, where first you just have a bunch of different widgets that you can select, and then when you get into a widget, you would select exactly what type of widget. So if developers wanted to create multiple types of widgets, say they did, you know, the Gantt chart widget, for example, then, oh, I'm getting some warnings about bitrate. All right, apologies if this is coming out blurry. All right. So let's work through that iOS assumption or kind of style of approaching this. All right, so if I do something like this, This is Gantt chart. Okay. Oh, we got auto layout on this page. All right. So we have a Gantt chart. I'm getting a little bit of a delay just because I'm streaming, and so it's kind of messing with my Figma. So if I'm misclicking, that's why. Okay, so we could say that this is a, I don't know, let's just say this is large widget. Okay, so you have a Gantt chart. All right. So now we're looking at, so from here, I see all add widgets, I select Gantt chart, and now I have the options just for this Gantt chart widget. So I got large, small, and maybe like a small second style. And so then from here, say I've selected one. Now from here, say I selected this middle small one. I thought I might have cursors in here, but I don't. So then I imagine we would use this, the pattern of it sticking to my cursor, where I could just drag it and it kind of snaps to different grid locations, kind of similar to iOS. So that's one way that we could solve that. So I guess we would get rid of the text as well. So we don't need to frame that. Let's ungroup it. Okay. Okay, so if that's the case, say I put like a small one, and then I go through and I add another one. So we're gonna need this back up here because I accidentally deleted that. Can I make it pop? No. This is not for clients. You're the worst stakeholder. Instead of putting the add widget button here, I can put it up in the header. So essentially the header would be in a sort of editing mode. Let's see if I can do that. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, because I have the finish editing here. So let's duplicate that. And that's like add widget. Lock and drop it. Can I make a lock and drop it? Yeah, but that's a premium feature. It's only for premium subscribers. Turn up the music gladly. I'm curious if this music is going to get a DMCA copyright takedown. I don't think so because it's using the same live stream channel. If you follow the Lo-Fi Hip Hop Girl channel, like it's the same music. I imagine that they're not getting copyright takedowns every stream. Maybe they paid for it. I don't know. All right. Okay, so I've gone to editing mode. We'll say finish editing, add widget. Might swap those for some secondary buttons or some text link buttons. We're just keeping it simple. We're basically wireframing right now. So let's keep it easy and think through the flow. All right, so doing a Gantt chart. Let's say we've selected the small widget and then we dragged it and we dropped it there. So let's actually do that in between state while I have a file around that has a whole bunch of like cursors so that I could show that this is being dragged. But it's not in this one, so I'll have to go dig it up. But we'll just say that there's a cursor on this and then this is being dragged. So actually let's drop this like 50% opacity as if it's being like actively dragged. And I'll go find cursors later. Okay. So say I drop it right there, it locks into that grid spot. For it to lock into a grid, I would have to have some kind of layout, I believe. There's a Spotify list for chill beats. I'm using the same stream as that one, but maybe I'll have to dig that up as well and use it. It's not the first time I got a copyright claim on my videos though. All right, so I've dragged it here, and then if I go back to the add widget screen as well. And then I do it with, let's say this is calendar. What are you locking to a grid? So this is exploring the idea of if there isn't panels, that widgets just get dropped onto the page. How would widgets behave if there wasn't some kind of panel management? Because otherwise we have to think through the affordances for how widgets go into a panel, but then also the affordances for managing a panel. So things like, does a panel get removed right away when things are pulled out of it, or does it retain its shape? Does it, can you drag around a panel and move the entire panel, which would be essentially a group of widgets? And a few other, like, what does snapping look like? How do things work if you decided to drag a panel larger or smaller? Because if we have things like this idea of large widgets and small widgets, which I think we probably have to have, then the challenge is, what happens if I create a panel and then I put in a small widget and I put in a large widget? That becomes a problem now, because now one of them has a minimum size. The large widget would have to have a minimum size, otherwise it would break, where a small widget could have a much smaller minimum. One by one, one by two. Yeah, we need a grid, one by one by two. 100 by 100 as a grid. It's an interesting idea. But then we think about like this as a window as well. So does that mean like if I dragged this and it's on a grid? So let's actually pull up the Figma grid. Layout grid. All right, so let's add a layout grid just for kicks. Okay, it's kind of approximating what we're talking about here. Let's do it as a 16. So it's not so small. I think that'll come up on the stream. Okay, do that. We'll just up its opacity a little bit just so I make sure everyone can see it. Okay. So if this is the idea, so I come in and it snaps to like this grid. So it snaps to here. Okay. Now do I have, the only way to resize it is like snapping to these grids? Widget could get registered to different sizes, like large or small. Yeah, that's one way that we could do it. Potentially. I think how it has to work is that small widgets have a max resize. Like it can't get any bigger than that. And large widgets have a minimum that they can go. And so if a large widget and a small widget are inside the same grid, so something like this, where I've dragged and I put a large widget that kind of expands to this size. Now I go and I drag in like a sidebar widget, and in fact, we could actually grab like, let's actually grab these two that we actually have. Just kind of play with this. Okay, so I've taken this widget and I've snapped it in here. Now, this type of widget, I would expect it to expand into the available area. So let's actually take this situation. So we've taken this widget name and I'm dragging it around. All right, I go and I snap it into this corner. I would want this to expand into the available area. I would want this. I'd want this to look like this. But I wouldn't want a sidebar widget, something like a mini calendar. I wouldn't want this to fill up the available space. It could, it would just look so wonky. If we want to do resizing, could we resize proportionally? That's what I was thinking. Resize proportionally. Now, if I was building this interface, let's see, then I go and I click add widget again. All right, let's try this out. Say this is the mini cal. All right, what does Brian say? So Brian is one of the good friends that I'm working on this with. So he is a fantastic developer. And so if he's weighing in a lot on the chat, you know why. He's actually working on this and thinking about this as well. So what if we register this by grid units? If you want to resize, could we resize proportionally, 1 by 1, 2 by 2? That's what I was thinking, but at the same time, I'm trying to think through this idea of widgets that like would grow too large or would look weird by being far too large. Or do we give users the ability to basically create an interface that looks silly? That is a question. All right, so let's just prototype this flow. Let's see what this looks like. Let's link this up. Let's create a frame around that. The less opinionated, the better. Less opinion with logical constraints. True. I mean, there's really just a couple of schools of thought when it comes to that. There's design that's really about being opinionated with certain things and just kind of open and kind of be able to do what you want in other areas. In this situation, we want to limit the amount of times that users are doing things that would clearly nobody would want. But even that, I'm not too sure. All right, let's prototype this. Let's see how it feels. So let's assume that we typed in, name this personal calendar. All right. This is super, super sloppy prototyping. But this is the beautiful thing about not having external stakeholders, is that you can be as sloppy as you want, and you can work through these ideas and just go for them as much as possible, and not worry about like spending too much time on polish. That's what I've really liked about consulting with startups, is for this exact reason, is that you spend way less time thinking about how you're going to polish this up and present this, and more about the actual work of design. All right. So let's do this. We're going to click this frame, and we're going to go over here, and then we're going to click this frame. We're going to go over here. We're going to make sure that this is using editing mode. So we'll do blank state, prototype that. All right. And then we'll go, we'll change this Gantt chart to this widget. All right, let's reset size on this one. Oh, that's just silly. Okay. So even this, how to display this, would probably have to scale it down. But then it's like, what would this look like? Would you even be able to see what the widget is at a scaled down view? Let's see. Something like this. Scale it down to the size of all the other widgets. I guess you could. It'd be a little tricky with certain ones. Okay. Well, let's just do it as if we were... Let's do them as, kind of actual size right now. And then we'll figure out that later. All right, so we got a mini cal. And then we'll say... What if all right, Ryan has an idea. Maybe widget creators can set limitations, mins and maxes. What if some were flexible via width and height and some were fixed proportionally? That's an interesting idea. That's kind of what was rolling around in my head as well, with some kind of framework. So say, let's think aloud on this one. Say that there's a large widget, a medium widget, and a small widget. Just kind of like breakpoints for pages as well. So you can create a small widget, and so it would have min and maxes. See, the challenge that I have with fixed is certain ones being fixed is that if I put it in a column where it's with similar size things, now I have to force that column to be the size of the one fixed item, even though I could want it a little bit wider or a little bit narrower. So that's kind of the challenge of that. I think having min and max for different size ranges. So it's just kind of like screen resolutions in a way. But then you scale proportionally only though. I'd have to explore that. I'm gonna have to build out more widgets to really kind of explore this idea. This is what's complicated about this app, is that this is all based off of like little complicated pieces of UI that I have to build out in order to solve these problems. When prototyping it is a little challenging. But let's mess around with this idea. Let's see what this looks like. All right, so we have like this widget grid here. All right, and so this is and in fact, we could probably grab some other things. They're not built out as widgets just yet, but we could grab that thing. Let's go to the sidebar. Grab this list. So I just updated to a new graphics card. And even the one that I have is threatening to burst into flames, trying to use an Electron app and stream at the same time. We'll stretch these out. Okay. Maybe we have some filters like right above here. I'm not sure what assets I have here. Ah, it's not a pill. It's called a chip. We could have some filters up there. All right, so I'm going to take some notes in the sidebar as well, just kind of around it. This is something I do sometimes in the design file. Sometimes I keep it separate. I'm doing a little bit more work in Figma. I like to keep things kind of sketchy and work in something like the Concepts app on the iPad is really great for sketching out concepts and kind of thinking through these things before you get into design. But for something like this, it's a little trickier because I'm working with a lot of different screen real estate. And so you can work in Figma. I might try to set up my iPad so that I can use it as an additional monitor next time. So we're just going to kind of blend this process. Just know that this is typically not exactly how I would do it, but it's kind of a way that I've worked as well. All right, some notes here. what happens when a widget has multiple versions / sizes? All right. All right, let's continue on with our thing. So let's say calendar app. Okay. So for something like this would be a calendar. This widget would only have, that's why it's doing that. All right, cool. All right, so let's say like calendar, this is an example of something that would only have one size, so it'd just be this. So I guess we could possibly skip over this page. Let's add that note here. All right, so the thought is, so in some circumstances, so like the mini calendar, say that the developers created different versions where sometimes there's dots for events. So I think I've actually created that here. So state, no, I didn't, but I did do like hovers. All right, so what if there's a version where there's like a series of dots where there's events, and then what if there's one that's just clean? So that's just an example of a couple of different variations that they could create. And so they would go into this variations tab as well. It's also the same thing if you ever created iOS widgets, that there's different variations on a widget. But I haven't messed around with widgets too much in iOS, so I'm not sure exactly what happens if there's only one widget variation. I think it would just immediately drop you and wouldn't take you to the selection. That would definitely make it a little bit more streamlined. Well, let's just do this interface just like this, and just kind of keep going from here. All right, so we go to the calendar. It's here. I think we can get rid of this text when we're dragging it. We're going to prototype this. And then from here, let's say 50% opacity. Oh, there's still a gray block behind it. And then it would expand. All right. All right, let's click through this flow. Okay. So I've clicked on the plus to add a new interface, or to add a new view. That's what we're calling them, views. I type out what I want, and then I click blink layout. Add widgets to build your view. So let's add a widget. So now I have this cluster of widgets. Oh, I got my hover state still on this. So I want to do calendar. then from here, click here, back, go back. Okay. All right, so I wanted to start with this calendar. So I click on this. And this is the only option in here. Yeah, we're just gonna have to skip this step if there's only one option. It just seems silly. Let me zoom in. I apologize. Full screen. Okay. All right, so now I love this widget, and I definitely want to add it. So I click it, and now it's stuck to my cursor, and I can drag it around, and it'll show me it's snapping. And so I drag it and I drop it in the corner, and this fills to the available space. Filling to the available space is something that I would expect this to do. I wouldn't expect it to just snap or even maintain its proportions. I wouldn't expect it to do something like this. So I clip content. I wouldn't expect it to do something like that. I would want it to fill the available space. I wouldn't have to want to manage that. But now take the same idea and apply this to the mini cal. I don't want that to expand the entire available space. That just looks silly. Right? So if I took the mini cal, we're going to actually break out this item, detach this because I don't want the whole thing. I just want this widget. See, if I drop this in to a page as like the very first widget that I dropped, I wouldn't want this to expand like this. That looks silly. What I want it to do is maintain its proportions. But now how do we manage that? Now do I have the ability to resize this individually? I don't know if I like this. I think we need some kind of panel management. All right. So I think we would have some kind of panel management because if I went and let's prototype an alternative view, or let's split this. Okay. Say I've selected the mini calendar. Now let's say this has multiple variations. So the way iOS does it, it leaves some space as well for like a description, I believe. All right. Okay. So I've selected one of these mini calendar variations. I'm dragging it, I'm dropping it. Do I expect it to fit, to expand into the available space? Or do I expect it to default? Okay, so let's link that up. So, user has selected the mini calendar. They've selected this mini calendar variation, and it links to here. Oh, that's one too many. All right. So now we're dragging it. And then when I've dropped it, it expands. Okay. All right. Let's click through that and see how it feels. Okay. Blank state. And then I fill in personal calendar. Click blank. Add widgets. I'll add a widget. And I want to do this mini cal. Oh, cool. Got a bunch of variations. Select this middle one. Linking didn't work. There we go. All right. So I select this mini one, or this middle one. Includes dots for events. That sounds awesome. So I click on that, and now I'm dragging it, and now I drop it, and then expands. No, that feels wrong. I don't like that. So what I should do is instead it should keep its proportions. I drag it and then I drop it. It keeps its proportions. That feels right. But now if I drop something below it, so I go back, I add widget, so we're going to All right, so now we're going to repeat this for the event list and see what this looks like, because what we're trying to do now is get the feel for, now I've created a page and the first widget that I dropped on was the mini calendar. Now if I'm going to add a second widget, what would that look like? What would the interaction between the first widget and the second widget be? So we're going to do that next. So we're going to do the event list, and we'll grab the event list widget. Okay, say that there's 3 different variations of it. You know what, let's just do 2 variations of it. And it, you know, it would have this text below it for each of these, but we're just rough prototyping, moving as quickly as possible. Okay, so now I like this widget, this variation of it, and so I go to drag it on. All right, this represents me dragging it, it's sticking to the cursor. You know what, let's go to the Figma community and let's find a cursor actually. Universal cursors, awesome, duplicate that. All right. Let's grab these 33 variations and let's drop this in our project. Beautiful. Okay. Where's the dragging? Right, here it is. Dragging variation. Awesome. So let's go and add that to our views just so we're super clear. All right, so we have this dragged. Boom. All right. Let's add it to this one as well. And let's add it to this one as well. Lovely. Okay. So now we're dragging this widget, but on this particular one, also frame that, just keep them grouped. This particular one, we already have a widget in place. So what we're probably gonna have to do is add this pattern of not dragging, sticking to the cursor like you see here, where it would be sticking to the cursor like this. It would probably need to snap to its locations. So even if you're like a little off, it would snap to right here, or it would snap to here. Okay. Well, let's say it snaps here. Then when I drop it, get rid of that rejected one. Let's put that over there. And now in this situation, let's drag it over here. Get rid of the cursor. We've now dropped it. So we're getting rid of Dropbox. Okay. So even this is brings up an interesting thing. So I just dropped this here and it doesn't take up the available space vertically. Now that's just work for me to do as a user to then stretch this out to make sure that it works vertically. So I would want something like this to take up the available space. So this is something that Brian was just mentioning in the chat of certain things being fixed. Mini-cal is proportionally scaling. Say it's 1 by 1 versus something like this. This horizontally, I don't want it to take up too much space, but vertically I want it to expand to the entire space. So that is a tricky problem, but I'm at an hour and a half. I have some plans later today. I was only planning on streaming for an hour. And so yeah, I'm happy that we went over and we spent a little bit more time together. So I think I'm going to end the stream right there. Thank you so much for joining me on this first Design Fika. I plan on being back next Friday to hang out more, work on some more design, talk more about some UX questions that you have as well. So feel free to join me. I promise I will try to work on some of these audio video syncing issues and try to get those worked out. Hopefully we can have things a little bit smoother and have it looking a little bit better. But until then, thanks for joining me. And I'll see you next time. Have a good one.